How many times have we had people come into our office and they look at their situation, or we look at their situation in an initial standpoint and go, all right, there's no red line right now. You seem to have, plenty of assets to handle your income stream in retirement that you're looking to accomplish. But because of that, you've now created other problems.
I would think the number one problem that we see is generally a very large tax obligation that is going to be realized out into the future. And what we find now with the segment of folks that we're working with now in pre-retirement and retirement years is it's not just their tax problem, it's ultimately going to be a multi-generational tax problem.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Retire Stronger, episode 37. Today with me is Bill Kearney, one of the co-founders of Crown Advisors. Bill, say hello to everyone.
Well, hello everyone. Hey John, how you doing today?
It's nice to see you. I'm doing well. Hope you are. Today, Bill, we have a pretty interesting topic that we're going to discuss, which is basically we'd like to call this the red line dilemma. It's a topic we work with a lot of our clients on, pretty much every single day. And what we're talking about here is what happens, or understanding what happens when retirees approach the point of potentially running out of money during retirement, and how smart tax optimization can potentially change the outcome of that situation. So basically, the moment when your retirement plan crosses into that out of money territory, that's what we're going to talk about, folks. So Bill, I know that you have a lot of thoughts on this, so I'm going to let you chime in here.
Yeah, John, we've often called the red line dilemma here kind of the ultimate retirement dilemma that people face. And I think sometimes people, oftentimes people either don't want to think about this, they don't know how to think about it, they don't know what it is. We'll tell you what it is, right? The red line that we're referring to here is the point in time out in the future at which your retirement assets are at risk of depleting down to a point where they can no longer sustain your lifestyle. And the reason we call it the red line is that, in fact, it came from some planning software that we use that actually draws a red line out in the future to indicate in what year this is likely to happen based on the direction that you're currently heading. So we call it the red line dilemma, red line awareness. It's basically the starting point for people. And again, oftentimes, John, you know as well as I do that folks just don't want to really think about this, or
they'll have to bury their head in the sand, right?
Or they just assume it's all going to work out, and so they don't really even know if it's out there. It's not something that people think about every day, but it is something that we think about every day. It is basically the starting point for the conversations that we have with folks in our line of work, which is we've got to figure out what does everything look like right now? And if there's a problem with what you're currently doing, when are you going to realize that problem out in the future so that we can then maybe begin to work on possible solutions changing that? So that's really where the initial focus of red line awareness and the ultimate retirement dilemma, as we call it, is where it comes from.
Right. I mean, and what we're talking about here is, your spending versus your longevity, and adding in a third element of taxes, how they all kind of work together or against each other potentially during retirement, and how we go about planning to either avoid certain pitfalls and help your assets and your income stream that you have in retirement last as long as it's necessary for you and your lifestyle during those retirement years. Bill, I'm going to pose this question. Why do traditional financial plans that you see out in the marketplace, why do they miss this danger zone? Like, why are other planners and software that's out there not talking about this?
Well, I think there is a miscalculation in where the focus should be inside of a retirement plan. I think oftentimes what you see out there is a focus on rate of return. and a focus on the asset management part of your portfolio, which is, it's incredibly important, right? We know that managing assets and managing them effectively and building portfolios that, are inside your risk tolerance and are in alignment with your goals. And, all of that is important to work on and to create and have inside of your financial plan. But as you said earlier, John, if you don't also take into account other factors, such as what does your tax problem look like out in the future, right? What does your tax problem look like on an annual basis? What we're talking about are, what are the holes in my wealth bucket that I have? What are the things that are going to drain my wealth away unnecessarily that are actually inhibiting my success in retirement, which are actually maybe pushing forward or moving up when I'm going to realize that red line? I think traditional plans miss this because their focus is in the wrong area. We need to figure out first where the problem is out in the future and work backwards from that on what solutions we can operate with. And I'll give you one other thing here, John, and I'd like you to come in and add on top of this as well. Oftentimes, other planners, other techniques and tools that are used, the solution is just, well, you need to withdraw less money in retirement. You're going to need to dial things back, or you're going to be in a lower tax bracket anyhow. You won't need as much in retirement. I'm sorry, that's just not true. All right. It's, as long as we've been doing this, I find it very often, pretty much every time that we're working through this with folks, most people don't want to take a pay cut when they hit retirement. It's just not the way that works. And so going from the 5% rule of withdrawal down to the 4% rule, down to the 3.5% rule, or wherever we are at this point, isn't really a valid solution to the problem.
Yeah. And you could add another one on there too. I mean, a lot of advisors or clients that come to us with plans done by other advisory firms, the advisor just says, well, we'll just get you more return to solve the problem, which means usually taking on additional risk in the portfolio. If those returns can even be achieved that they're trying to achieve, which could put the client at a higher risk during market pullbacks. So inopportune situations that could happen that could erode their financial well-being even further. But I completely agree. If you take a look at, some of the reasoning behind the choices that are made or the plans that we've seen, is you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. You can take out less money if you need to. To your point, no one wants to go backwards in lifestyle during retirement. The lower tax bracket it's very much potentially a myth, because I don't know if you're paying attention out there, folks, but the level of debt in this country is continuing to climb at alarming rates, and there's really only two ways to go about solving that debt crisis that this country has. And those two ways are austerity, which means we have to cut programs and stop spending, or we have to raise taxes to cover all of those obligations, or a combination of both. That's the only way we can solve this problem. So I don't see taxes getting lower, not necessarily for folks in retirement. It's very possible that your tax rates could stay the same, if not even potentially go up, depending on where your assets are. So now we're talking about asset location. And I'm not sure if that was where you were wanting to go with this, but there's so many factors that play into this that are beyond your control once retirement actually happens. Once you finally retire and you get into those years where you lose control over some of the choices you can make to better yourself in retirement and solve this red line dilemma that we're talking about that you could potentially have, you've now lost opportunity at that point. And that's a big problem. Bill, let's talk about real quick too. How many times have we had people come into our office and they look at their situation, or we look at their situation in an initial standpoint and go, all right, there's no red line right now. You seem to have plenty of assets to handle your income stream in retirement that you're looking to accomplish, but because of that, you've now created other problems. What other problems are we talking about, Bill?
I would think the number one problem that we see is generally a very large tax obligation that is going to be realized out into the future. And what we find now with the segment of folks that we're working with now in pre-retirement and retirement years is it's not just their tax problem. It's ultimately going to be a multi-generational tax problem. Because if you have money in pre-tax IRAs, if you have a significant amount of money in pre-tax IRAs, and we have a number of clients who are in this situation where they don't actually need the money that's in those accounts. And there's a whole other segment we could do on required minimum distributions and, you know, the money that you have to take out of these at certain ages, that type of thing. But oftentimes we find that the required money that people need to take out of these accounts based on achieving age 73 is not something that they need. And so they take the money out because they're required to, but they never tap into the account for any other purpose. And ultimately what's going to happen is they're going to leave that account to someone else in their family. And now what happens is that person is now going to have to pick up the rules of that IRA, the distribution rules and the tax rules, and it's going to affect their household as well. So, you know, kind of getting down in the weeds on that part of the tax part of it, John. But what we see is that this is not just something that you're going to have to deal with. It's something that your children will have to deal with if you've been successful in any way in managing your accounts. And likely it could be a rather large tax burden for them as well. John, I want to shift gears though real quick here.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to talk a little bit about the one of the tools that we use. And I know there's a number of different analysis tools, initial analysis tools you can utilize to kind of figure out, hey, where am I? What does everything look like right now? And how do I project into the future as to what things are going to look like? Talk a little bit about 9 to Know, John.
Yeah, and let's talk about how 9 to Know kind of helps folks out with their emotional side of their overall wealth management plan, their financial plan in general, right? I mean, you've got a lot of people sitting out there that have fear of the unknown, uncertainty of where life is going, where taxes might be during retirement, where Social Security might be, loss of confidence in multiple areas. So there's a lot of things that play into the decisions that people make or lack of decisions that they make. And a tool that you just brought up that we utilize with our clients can be a very strong starting point. I want to make sure that I really reiterate the fact that this is just a starting point, but it's a great little checkup you can do. Again, we call it 9 to Know. It's a quick diagnostic tool that you can use and answer literally 9 questions to get a pretty decent idea of where you stand financially right now. There's a lot more that goes into doing financial planning than 9 questions that you'll answer on this 9 to Know questionnaire. But it's a really great tool. It'll help you uncover kind of where you are today and possibly where you're going. It'll unveil and reveal some possibly some hidden risks that you have, from taxes to inflation to longevity. We can sequence of returns. Another one it'll probably possibly unveil for you. And this will help us start with what we like to call a retirement readiness conversation and give us the starting point of where our blueprint of where we're heading with your financial plan. So 9 to Know is something we can literally send you a link. You click on it, you fill out the information, answer the 9 questions, and it's a great starting point to determine what kind of issues you may be having, that you might be facing during retirement. Anything I missed on that, Bill?
I don't think so. I think that, just kind of adding on to that, what this allows us to do is kind of pick up the ball and run with it with you by our side, right? With that person by our side to say, look, this is where you stand right now. It doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong. It's just showing us that, hey, there might be a problem out in the future, and this is why.
Right.
And here are some simple solutions that we could utilize to fix the problem.
And it might not be a red line. Again, like we have plenty of clients or prospective clients that come in through our door, and they do have red line issues where they are showing that they are potentially going to run out of money at an inopportune time. Yours may not show that, but it could, right? But even if it does not show a red line, that doesn't mean that planning isn't appropriate, that you should not be doing planning. It just means that, okay, now we have other issues. Longevity risk does not seem to be an issue right now, but we now have other issues like possibly taxes being a major issue, or legacy, leaving a legacy to your family, which you mentioned earlier. That could be an issue depending on how accounts are structured and where you currently are planning on taking income from during retirement. So there's lots of things that it could point out to us that we're going to look at and have a discussion with you on.
That's right. And what this often does is it builds on top of itself, and it helps prevent what we call the domino effect inside of planning, which is if you don't, or if you focus on one issue, you might miss some of the other ones that are going to cause problems down the road as well. This helps us kind of avoid problems like that. Tax optimization is a huge part of this. We have just as many people who come through the system who do not have a red line, as you said, and do simply have tax optimization issues. And ultimately, what this means is that most times the way people are set up with their account situation is they're set to overpay the IRS just because of the way they are structured. And by restructuring them over time, this isn't something you can do in one meeting. Generally, it takes years and years to get yourself restructured and rebalanced correctly. You can actually achieve or get as close as you can to tax optimization, meaning the lowest tax bill that you're going to be required to pay. It's not a pain-free process. Oftentimes, it requires you to do things that you may not like to do on the surface, such as a Roth conversion, where you have to pay taxes on your money now when you wouldn't necessarily have to. But there are good reasons why you might consider doing that. So I think those are some of the big reasons as to why all of that makes sense, and why going through a process to figure out where you are makes sense.
Absolutely. Bill, let's talk about an example. Let's give a great example of clients we've worked with. Let's give an example of one where there was an actual red line when they first came to us. Do you want to kind of share a little bit of the story behind any specific client that comes to mind? I know we also we took a client's data and removed the names to protect the innocent, and kind of put it into a sample so that we could kind of share with folks how we work and what we do. Do you want to kind of go through that a little bit?
Yeah, we actually renamed them the Sample family. Very
John
very
and Mary
creative.
Sample.
Yeah, just very creative, and that's about as creative as we get with naming. But it did change, obviously, to protect the folks who did come through. But it's a real case that we show people when they come in and say, look, this is what happened. And it's a great display of how the software works, which is nice, but also the power of the software and the power that it can create good outcomes in your life, puts you on the right track. So this particular case, family came in, and when we put the initial information in, it did show out into the future they were going to have a red line. I believe it was somewhere in their late 80s, let's say 86, 87 is when they were going to run out of retirement assets. And, we stopped there for a minute and talked about that. And I said, this is pretty far out in the future. But imagine what that would be like if all of a sudden you had to change your lifestyle. Maybe you had to move in with a family member, right? Or you had to dramatically change what your lifestyle looked like at that point in time. And beyond that, what about the 10 years leading up to that as you saw your assets depleting? How does that make you feel? Right? It's not just about the date out in the future when you run out of assets. It's the whole loss of peace of mind out into the future. And that's a big problem. Now, this is age 86, 87. A lot of people might say, hey, I'm not going to live that long. I even told them, hey, this problem solves itself as long as you die at age 85, right? Obviously, that's not the best solution for planning purposes, and we kind of made light of the situation, right? But that's not the whole purpose there. But there are, simple solutions. If we work on, rate of return on your accounts going forward, maybe we do a little bit better there. If we work on a few other little steps, we could easily solve that red line, which is what happened in step number 2 for that.
Right.
And we showed them, hey, here's some simple steps that we can take to solve that red line. Now you have increased your peace of mind in this area. I said, the problem is if we solve this problem, if we get rid of the red line, what actually happened is I created another problem for you. This is that domino effect, right? Where we solve one problem, but now another one creeps up. And in this case, they ended up having a rather large tax problem because we solved the red line problem. See, the tax problem isn't there if you run out of money. Even the IRS can't come and get you if you run out of money at that point. So if we fix the problem and they have $1 million at age 100, they likely have a rather large tax problem that's been created here as well. So we show them in step number 3, if we take step number 2 and we optimize that from a tax standpoint, now look, we have close to $3 million left at the end of this plan that you can distribute as you see fit to your beneficiaries.
Right. And longevity was never an issue, right? So that we were able to take care of their lifestyle, their income stream. All of that was projected out to be a non-issue throughout their retirement years based on the lifestyle that they had chose. And they were able to leave a larger, more tax efficient legacy to their family at the end of the planned period that we worked through within the financial plan for these folks. And this is the whole point of what we're getting at, folks. Why go through a planning process like this? Well, most of our clients hire us to do this because they're looking for peace of mind. They don't want to burden their children and have to move in with them during retirement because they run out of money or they didn't plan appropriately for the types of locations where their assets were being held. And what I mean by that is whether it's held in a Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA or a brokerage account, for example. How many of you out there want to delay your retirement a few years because your plan says that you're not going to be able to, live comfortably on the current, amount of assets you have based on your income plan? So basically, your plan is telling you you're going to outlive your money. You have longevity risk. How many people want to delay that retirement? No one does, or not retire at all. I mean, how would you react, folks, if someone told you can't retire based on your current situation? That's why people come to us to do these financial planning, steps, is to make sure that doesn't happen to them. What about having the freedom to retire earlier? What if we could show you that you could retire earlier than what you're thinking of, or what your current plan is telling you that you can do? It's not just about the numbers, folks. It's about confidence and control. And I mentioned that earlier, is if you wait too long to do this planning, you lose control over the different tools that are at your fingertips right now, which, if you act now, you'll have much more confidence in your plan from a long-term perspective. Bill, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in and cut you off, but I just, these are reasons why people come to us and hire us to do these plans, is because it just, it creates a much better peace of mind for them from a long-term planning perspective.
Well, I was just going to say, too, before you close us out here, that there's really 2 questions that you should be asking yourself at this point, which is, first of all, do I know whether or not I have a red line out in the future? I think a lot of people have the walk around number. I call it the lawnmower number.
Right.
When you're out cutting the grass and you're thinking, do I have enough to retire? And you're thinking about a number in your head that if I can get to this number, then I can retire. But that may not be true. Or that number may be much larger than what you actually need to retire. So the first question is, do I have a red line? And do I know where it is? It's kind of part 1 and part 2 of that question. And the second one is, let's assume I don't have a red line. Do I know what my tax burden is going to be and how that's going to affect my retirement plan and my assets out into the future? If you can answer those 2 questions confidently, you have a great plan already set up and in place. If you can't answer one or both of those questions, it's probably time to get a checkup.
Yeah, which leads us right into the whole point of talking about the 9 to Know tool that we have, that we could share with anyone who's listening to this podcast episode or watching this video on YouTube. Folks, avoiding, your red line or figuring out whether you have a red line or not is very crucial in your income planning for retirement. So if you would like to take advantage of this offer, feel free to reach out to us. You can call the office 704-469-0200. You can go to our website at crownadvisorgroup.com. Again, that's Crown Advisor Group. That's advisor with an O-R. Go there, schedule a time to chat with us if you want to, but you too can go in as a complimentary offer to you, and you go in and answer the 9 questions, figure out where you are, establish a baseline, allow us to take a look at it and give you some either some pointers on what your next steps should be, or schedule some time to have a deeper dive, a deeper discussion into where you stand and what options you might have in front of you. But folks, that's really all we have today. Bill, I don't know if you have anything else, but feel free to hit the like button, subscribe, forward it to your friends, family, or colleagues. We would appreciate that very much. And as always, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next episode of Retire Stronger. All right, folks, have a great day.
Thanks for listening.